when I learned that he's a father and a friend more than he's anything else, I think that's when things started to change for me. I grew up in a Christian household. From the time I was born, it was church every Sunday, and I have the most amazing parents ever. And so when I was in elementary school, life was just normal and fun. And in fourth grade, everybody in my church group was getting baptized, so I was like, well, that's the next thing to do. I'll get baptized, not really knowing what I was doing and why. And so I decided to get baptized, and I hadn't really faced any adversity up to that time. And so when I got to middle school, is really when things took a turn. My mom was an elementary school teacher, so I was out of that environment, and I had no idea what to do. I was so unprepared. My walk with the Lord was so shallow and based off my parents' faith, and so I ran right into the wrong friend group, and I just started pursuing to be cool, pursuing to be liked, and that led to, an addiction to nicotine, an addiction to porn, all in the age of 12, 7th and 8th grade. And so that ruined, obviously, my relationship with my parents, my relationship with the Lord, and I was completely lost. And so middle school was a really, really rough time. I would go to church every Sunday and put on the front of my parents' son and smile when I saw everybody, and then go right back to my sin 6 days a week, yelling at my parents and doing whatever I wanted to do. And I would pray whenever I needed something and read my Bible whenever my parents told me to. And so I had zero relationship with the Lord all through middle school, and then I got to high school, and I was completely lost, still searching for my identity and things that are of this world, and still going to church every Sunday. And so I think that's one of the things that I really want to emphasize on is, I was still in church every single Sunday and still struggling with such a great amount of sin. And when I got to high school, it just multiplied because things get a lot more serious. In my freshman year, I started partying. I fell in love with the idea of woman and having attention from women. And so I was just completely lost. And then I got my license before sophomore year, and that just magnified everything all over again. I was drinking every weekend, I was smoking, I was doing the vaping, doing stuff with girls. It was just everything textbook wise that you think sin is, that's what I was doing. Still going to church every Sunday and going to youth group every week. And so I was completely lost. And it got to the point that, I would just cry at night because I didn't know what to do. And I didn't feel like God was even real. I was like, if God's real, why is he letting me feel this way? My parents must just, have a good life and I don't. I had no concept of our Heavenly Father at all. And so I was partying, I was doing stuff with girls, I was completely surrounded by the wrong friend group, and going into junior year, I went to church camp. I went to church camp every year, but this church camp was different. It was the first time that I really, I think, saw the Lord in a more friend and father figure way, and not just somebody in the sky that knows my life. And so that kind of piqued my interest a little bit, but I was still partying and still drinking, and doing all the fun things that high schoolers think makes up life. And so I was going into senior year. Junior year was it was better for me. I didn't really go out as much, and I kind of became just a quieter individual, and I was going into my senior year, and my parents had always emphasized that I would go on a mission trip with my small group, going into senior year, and I was, my brother did it going into his senior year with my dad, and so I got to do it with my dad going into my senior year, and I was kind of like, I don't really want to go. I don't feel like going to Costa Rica and serving God, you know what I'm saying? And my entire life, I had kind of two different friend groups. I had my church friends who I saw every Sunday, and we were homies, but they just didn't agree with what I did during the week, so they didn't associate with me during the week. And then I had my school friends, obviously, and the friends that I hung out with the other 6 days a week. But I loved my small group and my friends at church and my small group leader, and so I was like, you know what? Like, they're going on this trip, so it'll be fun. I'll go with my friends to Costa Rica, and it'll be fun. I went to Costa Rica, and I went on a mission trip with an organization called Hope Partners through my church, not expectant of anything, really. And by, I think, day 2, I was on my hands and knees praying to God every single night, and I was like, God, like, He completely rocked my world, and completely showed me a different side of the world that I had never seen, a side that is heartbreaking to anybody, whether you're a believer or not. And He just spoke to me so vividly through the kids in that center and through the staff, and through everybody that was on the trip alongside me. And I began to understand that this God loves me, and He's been pursuing me and chasing me this entire time, and I've known that because I've prayed to Him every time I've needed something, and I've gone back to Him every time that I was lost. Those nights that I would come home hammered, I'd be like, oh, I'm sorry, God, why was I doing that, and so, that mission trip just changed everything for me, honestly. And I got back from that trip having had my true first experience with the Lord, where He met me where I was. And when I got back from that trip, I was like, Lord, I commit my life to You. I have no idea what that looks like, and I have no idea what that's going to entail, but I really truly just want to serve You and know You just like I saw You and knew You on that trip. And at that time, I had a girlfriend who is a great woman of God, and so she helped me a lot, and I thank the Lord for placing her in my life at that moment. And she showed me how to read my Bible. She showed me how to pray, and then I started slowly cutting out my other friends and hanging out with my youth group friends, and that's where I met my best friend, who's a wonderful man of Christ, and I get to share so much blessings with, and so it was going into senior year, and that's when that happened. And senior year, I just really slowly took the sanctification process and started cutting out everything that I had been running to my entire life. My anger issues started to fade away. All these things slowly started to change and line up, and man, I was just like, wow, this is amazing. I was so on fire for the Lord, and so much so that I was like, Lord, I really want to, I want to serve You. And so I applied to be an intern for the summer at that organization, and that's where I really thought I was gonna get the internship, because there had been interns from my church in the past. And so that was my plan after high school, was to go there and serve and be a missionary and do the things, and the acceptances came back, and I had not got picked. And so that was really my first adversity alongside the Lord during my senior year, is when that was. And I was kind of like, well, I still want to serve You. Like, I still want to go be a missionary. I felt the calling to the nations at that point, and I was like, Lord, I want to go do this. And so I started applying to organizations until my fingers hurt, man. I was sending out my resume everywhere. And with a different organization, I was locked in to go to Belize, and that fell through. And then I was locked in to go to Canada, and that fell through. And then I was locked in to go to Latvia, and that fell through. And at that point, I was just kind of like, okay, Lord, I thought this is what you had for me, but obviously it's not. So, show me what you have. And I really, truly believe that was the Lord testing my faith, and seeing if I had what it took to serve him and be a servant and a disciple. Because shortly after that, it was already January at this point, and I had no idea what I was doing after high school. I had gotten, 4, missionary opportunities fell through. And so I was sitting in gym class, I'll never forget. And the leader of the internship in Costa Rica texted me and said, hey bro, like, will you call me after school? And I was kind of just, at that point I was like, sure, whatever. And I called him after school, and he said, hey man, we had a guy drop out. The Lord just won't let me stop thinking about you. Like, I know it's late and you're gonna be late on fundraising, but are you willing to still come? And I was like, yes, 100% yes. And so at that point, I was already full circle back to Costa Rica, where I wanted to go. And I was so excited. But at that same point in time, me and that girl had broken up, and so I was kind of starting to figure out, the Christian thing on my own, and I started slowly falling back into what I had done before, not in any big degree. I was still reading the Word every day, but I would go out and drink on the weekends just because, all that time that I spent with her, I now had empty space, and so I didn't know how to fill it with things of the Lord. And so, I'll never forget, it was a couple weeks before I was set to go to Costa Rica, and the Lord really convicted me and was like, man, like, you're about to go serve me, and you're out at a party right now. And I was like, man, like, I gotta get my act together. And so it was really from that point on that I've been completely sold out for him. I went to that internship that summer, and I served for 3 months in Costa Rica, and it completely changed me as a person, changed everything. How could it not? And so that's when I learned the Lord on a whole new intimate level, and me and him grew our intimacy, and he showed me and laid out the things that he has for me, and so that was amazing. And then when I got back, I was so on fire for him, serving him. I just wanted to go and do it again. So I found another internship opportunity in the Dominican Republic with a different organization, and that opportunity fell in my lap, and I went not knowing anything about the organization. I didn't know anybody there. I had never been to the DR before, so here I was, set to go to the Dominican Republic, not knowing anything. And I landed, and I'll never forget, it's when it got real when I landed, and I was like, okay, Lord, well, I'm here, so do what you need to do. And that was a 4-month internship, and I say it turned me from a boy to a man, because I had to be an adult in the way I thought about things, in the way I just went about everything. Because in Costa Rica I had familiarity and I had people I knew there, but here it was just me, just me and the Lord, truthfully. And so that's where I met Firm Foundation Ministries. They took their youth group on a trip down there while I was down there, and I kind of led and facilitated their trip a little bit. And I met Don, and I met Colton, and I met Breno, and I met all the guys. And me and Don were talking one day, and he was like, hey, like, what's your plan after this? And I kind of told him, like, I don't really have one. At that point, I was going back to Costa Rica, so I had got invited back for that summer, and so that was my plan after that. But then I was getting back from Costa Rica in August, and I had no idea. I was kind of just dependent on what the Lord, was going to show me, which is a scary season to be in, but it's also a very encouraging season because it's where you need to have faith. And so I was just pushing through to the Lord to see what He had for me. And I emphasized that to Don, and he was like, "Hey man, well, we got a Bible college at the church, and if you want, like you could come up here. We could find a place for you to stay. You could intern at the church and see the whole church side of things. See how a church runs now that you've been in a missions organization for like a year. You can see how the church runs." And initially I said, "No, I don't really want to live in the cold. It's okay, bro." And so that was that. That was kind of the end of that conversation. And they left, and a couple weeks later, the Lord just didn't let me forget about that conversation. Just kept reminding me. And so I was like, "Okay, Lord, why do you keep reminding me this?" And it was kind of nearing the end of my internship there, my 4 months in the DR, and I had just met with one of my mentor leaders there, and they were kind of like, "Man, like, you need to figure something out," and I was, getting a little nervous about that, and so I had texted Don that day, and I said, "Hey, like, this is what I'm thinking, like, whatever," and he didn't answer for 2 weeks, and so, man, I was really, those 2 weeks were a little shaky for me. I was really like, "Lord, like, it's one of those times again where you've shown me something and it's not happening." But I hadn't fully surrendered it to Him, and so I'll never forget. I had just finished my day. I was doing baseball down there, and it was late. And man, I just put on worship music and just sat there and bawled on the floor, like, "Lord, I don't know what you have for me, but I want to do it." And I picked up my phone, and Don texted me, and he was like, "Yeah, man, like, we'd love to have you. Let's talk about it a little more." And from then on, the Lord just, accelerated everything. And I ended up leaving the DR, or I got back from the DR. I went to Costa Rica for 3 more months, led 10 mission trips there. And that was awesome. It was amazing. It was my second time back. I had a relationship with most of the kids. I have a relationship with the staff. And that, I think the second round of Costa Rica was just a very crucial time for, like, me and the Lord's relationship. I didn't necessarily have to just depend on Him 24/7. It was kind of like He was my best friend. And He was really just a good father to me in that season. And then I got back from Costa Rica, and that's how I ended up here. I flew out here in August, and I've been here since August, and it's been an amazing experience. I cherish the relationships and the friendships that I've built here. The Lord has used this year to just show me so many things about His church, about His community, about His people in a completely different side of the U.S. I'd seen His people in Latin countries and now in Florida, and so He's just used it to show me so many things about His people and His character. And now seeing the church side of things, I really think that I have a career in full-time ministry, and so after my time here, I'll go home and I'll finish my degree, and I'll look to get a job at a church in Florida. So that's how I got here today. The Lord, it was a slow, long process of me having to finally admit that I couldn't do it on my own, and that I needed the Lord's strength. But that takes surrender, and that's all He needs until He does His magical things and does what He does. So I think I was a very tricky one because I went to youth group all those Sundays, and so I heard the things, but I don't think I fully understood that God is a father and a friend. I always just saw Him as somebody that I needed to give things to, and He wanted me to live a certain way, and that's not who God is. He wants you to live a certain way, yes, but that way is not just a set of rules, and so I didn't understand that, and so when I learned that He's a father and a friend more than He's anything else, I think that's when things started to change for me. And so I would tell them today, just go home and talk to him. Just go home and tell him what you're feeling. Just go home and be like, Lord, like, this is all the things I feel, and I have no idea about you, but I want to. And he'll reveal himself, and that's when it takes your surrender to fully allow him to reveal himself and do the things that he wants to do with you.